And I really appreciate all of you taking the time this morning to listen to my story. And I wasn't really sure what the kind of audience would be, so I'm glad to see that it's kind of more of a tight-knit group, and hopefully we can have some discussions during or after the presentation. And I also want to note that I wish I could be really involved in addressing a lot of our climate challenges as well. But my primary focus up to this point has been on addressing homelessness, particularly folks that are unsheltered and living outside. So hopefully there's some parallels, and this is still interesting for you all. But let me get my screen up here. Let's see. After so many years of Zoom, you'd think I'd have this nailed down. All right, great. Hmm. Okay, can everyone see that? Great.
Yes.
All right, so this presentation is called Homeless to Home More. Can't get any more cheesy than that. Um, as I'm looking back, I wish we called it something else, but I guess Home More is still kind of cool. Um, So during the talk today, I'm going to cover a couple of key topics. So I'm going to start off with kind of laying the land of, where we're currently at with homeless with homelessness in California, um, excuse me, particularly in um, both the Southern California and California regions. I'm going to give a little bit of background to myself and why I'm particularly interested in doing this work. Um, and then I'll shift and share a little bit about the Homework Project, some of our key programs. Um, just to kind of put a little teaser out there, Tracy's dad is actually a huge part of one of our key programs. So I'll share a little bit about that when we get there. And I'll also monitor the chat just in case there's any questions. Cool. So I thought I'd start off with a very kind of elementary introduction. That is, what is homelessness? And I think this is always an interesting kind of exercise to go through to start out, just to kind of paint the picture of how homelessness, we tend to easily define homelessness as someone that we see sleeping outside. But in fact, it can be people that we don't even suspect or have any idea could be experiencing homelessness. And so this is a definition provided by the US. So this is a federal definition of how we classify homelessness in the United States. And, it introduces, I think, what we all kind of imagine is someone that lacks a fixed adequate nighttime place to sleep, whether they be outside or in a shelter or a transitional housing type of program. But it also includes people that are at risk of losing their housing within a few weeks. And I think one important area to highlight is our homeless youth population. Um, and I think a really interesting thing here is that, you know, I've met a lot of people that are experiencing homelessness in an outdoor capacity, but don't consider themselves as homeless. I've also met people that may live with their family and they're part of the LGBTQ plus youth population, and maybe they don't feel safe at home, and so they consider themselves being homeless. So I think we have to open our mind to different types of people that might be experiencing homelessness. And I also note, with these points that each year at the top of the year, cities do what's called their point in time counts, where they count the people that are experiencing homelessness in their area. And because of those reasons just mentioned, uh, that can make the counts, very inaccurate. Um, so just some things to think about. Uh, some other introduction stuff, some key distinctions in terms that I think are really important. The first being voluntary versus involuntary. So there is a good portion of people experiencing homelessness that choose to be homeless and could have access to housing, but due to potentially trauma or just simply a desire to live outside, are voluntary homelessness. Um, Another key distinction, pretty intuitive, but sheltered versus unsheltered. Um, Sheltered is classified as people who are in a short-term shelter, a navigation center, transitional housing program, things like that. And unsheltered would be people that you view sleeping in the outdoor elements. A couple of kind of theories and philosophies to think about that I think are interesting. The first is what's called a clustering effect. And, when I was in San Francisco for 4 years, I was always surprised at the amount of people that were not from San Francisco and were coming from Humboldt or San Diego, as far as I met people from Alabama, Oklahoma. And so San Francisco, because of the amount of vast services and the ability to get housed more quickly than other areas, a lot of people tend to cluster there at a chance at that opportunity. Another thing I bring up is this kind of perception of solving. And, I think a lot of people say we want to solve homelessness, but we need to be very deliberate and clear about what that really means, right? Does that mean only our unsheltered population, or does it go as far as, we want everyone to have, do we want to raise the standard of living for people to be in better housing as well? So I think we need to be clear about what our perception of solving really looks like. So some kind of big picture things as far as how many people. These are all, estimates, typically done through the point in time counts each year. So this is from 2023's data. So in the US, there's about 600,000 people experiencing homelessness. New York City is the top uh, area for homelessness, about 88,000 people experiencing homelessness there. Um, and then California as a whole has about 175,000, which is notably residing in Los Angeles. And then sort of the second tier cities being San Francisco, Sacramento, San Diego, and so forth. Probably things we're all pretty familiar with for those that are from California. So one thing that's particularly interesting to me is sort of this spatial distribution of people experiencing homelessness in California. And as you can see by just these kind of cherry-picked cities that are shown here, um, California or homelessness is very much a statewide challenge for California. We tend to think that it's really just a big city, it's really just an urban problem, but homelessness is amongst a lot of cities, even a few that I'm sure some of you have not heard of. And so particularly what I'm interested in and what I'm excited about this year is going to so many different cities to really understand the nuances and the differences in various homeless populations. And so just a quick example, on the far right here, you can see North Lake Tahoe and then Santee, which is in San Diego County. Um, and in Santee, they have about 150 people experiencing homelessness, most of which are living along creek beds and riverbeds, in a very rural environment, that often they're at risk for mudslides and other, um, you all probably know the terminology much better than I do, but uh, various environmental challenges that uh, is very risky for them to be living in that environment. Another example is in North Lake Tahoe. They have about 175 people experiencing homelessness, and the temperatures there get extremely low. And so, people, this population are living in a very rural, forested type of environment, where it's really cold. So I think what I'm trying to get at is just there's a lot of interesting stories there about, why someone is homeless in different areas, and also recognizing that, for the most part, a lot of people have the flexibility to kind of move around and be mobile, which we've seen or at least I've seen in cities like San Francisco. And just kind of wrapping up an intro to homelessness, I think these things are probably pretty well understood by most people through observation. Historically, we think of homelessness tied to economic reasons being the primary um, cause of homelessness. And actually, in the 1870s, that's when homelessness began. But it was actually jobs, not housing, that defined people as being homeless. So people were actually traveling across the U.S. Looking for jobs and living in these makeshift shanties. And that is what coined people as being homeless, which is interesting how this has kind of transpired into nowadays it being primarily we think of housing. Of course, the root word of homelessness is home. Um, and I think another interesting thing to point out here is that, economic reasons are really the only cause that I think is consistent amongst everyone that's experiencing homelessness, right? There are people that are unhoused that don't suffer from substance addiction, that don't have severe mental health. They may have good relationships with family members and loved ones. But across the board, people experiencing homelessness uh, do struggle with economic reasons in terms of being employed and obviously income. Okay, I think Tracy did a great job reading my bio, so I don't really need to introduce anything here. Um, but I guess just to kind of echo what she said, as a kid, I was always very interested in two kind of areas, which was homelessness and then our incarceral system. And I kind of took a very conservative choice of studying international business and marketing at USF. And I thought I was going to take a traditional kind of corporate route. And it was in 2020. How many stories start with that? In 2020, I moved into my first apartment in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, which is, the neighborhood that has a significant portion of the city's homeless population. And it was during that time that I really reflected on kind of what I wanted to do moving forward. And so that's how I got into doing this work. This is a quick kind of uh, image of where I lived for um, this apartment complex was in most of 2020 and 2021, and then I ended up moving one street up, which in the Tenderloin makes quite a bit of difference. But this was my view for a few years, and every day I was connecting with people that were homeless and learning their story, and just constantly perplexed at how this situation was being handled um, from all parts. Of course, devastating as well. Okay, so shifting into uh, our organization. So in 2020, decided to start the Homeware Project. We started in early 2021 is when we really got off the ground, and we formed our board, our internship program. Our internship program has been a huge part of the organization. Um, and we got going with what programs we thought would be good for us. So initially, the ambition was to launch a transitional housing program. That's still the long-term focus of our organization, but quickly realized that that was going to be hard to do right off the bat. And so we formed a couple of smaller programs that we could get off the ground in a, relatively year to 2 years time. The first is our education program, which is mostly highlighted by a blog, educational films, um, and a couple of other smaller projects. And then the other is our makeshift traveler, which you're looking at in the image on the right. And so this was actually a product engineered by Tracy's dad, Ken Tarlow. So it was a pleasure to work with him for over a year, and we're still working together. So we're making another iteration of the product. Um, and so we're utilizing the education and the makeshift traveler program really as a way to be in the community, connect with people experiencing homelessness, and learn what their needs are. And through doing that, we're taking that feedback and putting it straight into the development of our transitional housing program, which I'll get into in a few slides. So that's kind of the sequence and the flow of why we're doing which program and what capacity. So as far as our team structure, we are volunteer based. Um, we're aiming to bring on a few part-time team members by the end of this year. But our team structure has been in really two areas, our board, which is in the top left, and our internship program. So we've had over 150 interns come through the program in the past 3 years, from over 20 different states. Now we're focused on people in California. But it's really been a good way to get the younger population involved in, a social issue, and also bring some new, fresh minds to a challenge that, we've been facing for quite some time now. And so I think that was kind of a unique development that we had compared to some other organizations that may have been a little bit jaded. Okay, so our primary program right now is this crazy looking backpack. So we spent a little over a year designing this pack specifically for people experiencing homelessness. Um, and so it's a hard shell backpack. It's extremely durable. It weighs about 4.2 pounds with nothing in it. It weighs about 7 pounds with everything that we include. And one of the key parts of the pack is a solar panel that has a small battery and a charging port. And I'll get into why that's very important. But this has been a big part of our organization in the past few years. And this program really aims to address two key issues faced by people experiencing homelessness. The first is a lack of a consistent connection, and the second is an insecurity of belongings. Um, and so, just to kind of give an idea of why these things are so important, um, UCSF did a study that estimated a little over 70% of people experiencing homelessness use cell phones to connect with loved ones and access critical services. But of course, something that's sort of important for a phone, as we all know, is it's got to be charged. And I met a lot of people that were, going into SF Public Library, that were spending $5 a day on a coffee just to charge their phone. Um, during the holidays, going to use the Christmas tree in Union Square to just to charge their phone. And so it's kind of it seems kind of day to day to us, right? We just plug in our phone before we go to bed, but for people that are living in the elements, not so easy. Um, and so, of course, another big part of having a consistent connection is just being able to contact case managers, people working to get you housing, healthcare appointments. I can't tell you how many people I've met that were one phone call, one email away from being housed, but they couldn't be reached or they couldn't be found. So I think while it's a very small part of addressing homelessness, it's certainly, fundamental to being able to get housed. And then the second area that we address is the insecurity of belongings. So theft amongst people experiencing homelessness is rampant. Kind of a blaring example, and it will sound like I'm misspeaking, but I'm not. But I've met people that have gone through 20 cell phones in 1 month. So constantly changing cell phones because they get swiped while they're sleeping or things like that. So it's really hard to keep belongings with people. And as a byproduct, things like birth certificates, IDs, and vouchers get stolen, not because they have any value to people stealing them, but just as a byproduct of trying to steal something else. And so we tried to aim with this pack as being a secure location that is on, each person at all times, and able to keep these types of things secure. Um, so here's kind of a graphic that kind of illustrates some of the key features. Um, so we do include things like a sleeping bag, a radio, a flashlight, a rain jacket. We try to include multi-use items um, and things that aren't necessarily distributed by other organizations. So, uh, some unique kind of tools. So who we target for distributing these packs. So this sounds like a bunch of jargon, but um, it's not. So we try to target the involuntary unsheltered homeless. Basically, what that means is people that are sleeping outside and have the desire to be housed. Um, as I mentioned earlier, there's a portion of people that choose to be homeless and want to be outside, which is fine. But we're trying to target people that actually have the desire to be housed. Um, we also target people with minimal belongings. So our veteran population has been kind of a good population to serve as they're constantly mobile and usually just have a backpack and kind of you know, a condensed form of belongings. And then we also target people that have already begun the process of working with case managers or people working to get them into housing. So here's a couple of images here. Um, and this is our old version, the green one. So our new version is gray. And I've had enough people call it the turtle shell to know that we want to change the color. So, so here is a couple locations that we're going to be in California this year. Um, so we're confirmed to be in about 13 different cities. I might be missing a few on this list here. But really our aim is going back to what I mentioned earlier, is really trying to understand different homeless populations in different environments up and down the coast. So whether it be rural, suburban, urban environments, we really want to understand kind of what is the lay of the land throughout the state. And so that caused us to open up our programming to the rest of California. So here's a couple of numbers. So we started, I apologize, 2023 and 2022 are reversed. We started in 2022 with 130 packs distributed. All were in San Francisco. In 2023, we did about 350. Majority were in San Francisco. We worked with Palo Alto Veteran Affairs. We were in Berkeley, Redwood City. So we did some smaller pilots in those areas. And then this year, our overarching goal is to distribute 1,500 across 15 different cities. And yeah, a couple of other statistics. Around 70% of people we distributed packs to had cell phones. So yeah, all very interesting stuff. So these were a couple of the outcomes that we had from the pilot distribution. So those highlighted in green are ones that we deemed as successful. The ones that are gray are ones that we hope to improve upon this year. So I think one to highlight that we were happy with is that 65% of people that received our pack reported an improved access to appointments, both housing and healthcare, And then one that we're really aiming to improve upon this year is the reduced theft of belongings. So, we'd like this to be 100, but last year it was about 46. Okay, I want to share two quick stories. I don't know how we are on time. Do I need to wrap up?
We're fine. I mean, there's not really a huge time
Okay,
constraint. Yeah.
I'll just be 5 more minutes. So two quick stories. Um, so the first is a story of a man named Dave. And this is Dave pictured here. And David asked me to take a picture of him to share with his sister. And so this was 9 days into our distribution. Um, so just starting out. I mean, I was fresh into this. And as I'm walking away, Dave asked me, "Can you see if my mother died?" And I was very confused at why he was asking me that. And I said, "Sure, let me know what you need me to do." And so he gives me his sister name, and I go home, I call his sister, and it turns out that Dave's mother did pass away, and he also had $40,000 in an inheritance waiting for him. And, I think this story kind of illustrates just how important it is to have a connection and know where people are while they're experiencing homelessness. Um, and I've yet to find Dave again. So it's, at least from our end, doesn't have a happy ending. And we've had many success stories, people that have received our pack and within a few months have been able to get housed. So this is a story of a man named Thomas in San Luis Obispo. And Thomas had been homeless for over 4 years, living along a creek bed in a very rural area in Slow. And he had a healthcare and housing case manager that was helping to get him into housing. Um, and so he was able to get housed within a couple of months. Of course, there's other players here, but uh, great story there. And then just two more quick slides I want to share. One is our education program. So we're really excited. This year, we're actually launching a children's book about a hermit crab looking for a shell. So there's a lot of metaphors to homelessness in there, and it's supposed to be kind of an easy launch into discussions about homelessness in our elementary schools. So we're really excited about that project. Um, and then next year, we're aiming to launch a transitional housing program, a pilot version of this. And so it's going to be in a tiny home village model. And, I could talk about this for a long time, but I'm guess just to kind of put a feeler out um, for, you know, this program launching next year. A lot of work is still going into this. So we're just in the kind of developmental stage, but really excited to get this off the ground next year. And here's a quick timeline about kind of what we're envisioning for that program. Okay, that's it. I hope that was a little bit interesting. I know not totally climate based, but I think there's still some intersections between the two. Um, but yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions.